Welcome to the Enchanted Empath podcast, where we explore the mystical and magical within you. I'm Charlene, your guide on this journey of intuition, energy, and spiritual empowerment. Whether you're here to strengthen your empathic abilities, deepen your connection with the universe, or simply find a little peace and clarity, you're in the right place. Let's dive in and discover the magic that awaits you.
Hey everyone, welcome back. Today I want to share something a little more personal with you. And this is about the intuitive push that led me to leave the United States and how that moment changed everything for me as an empath, a mother, an entrepreneur, and a spiritual woman trying to make sense of a world that felt like it was spinning out of control. This is the first in a series I'm calling Why I Left the US, The Perfect Storm. And if this resonates with you, definitely stick around for the next episodes. First, let's talk about the storm before the exit. I didn't plan to leave the US when I did. Sure, the idea had been floating around in the back of my mind for a few years, but back in Oregon, I had settled into a life I liked. My community, my spiritual work, my clients, the rhythm that I had created, and then slowly, almost quietly, things began to shift. I started to feel like I was standing in the center of a storm that just wouldn't let up. Everywhere I looked, something was unraveling. The economy, healthcare, politics, the environment, even the dynamics with my own kids. And as an empath, none of it stayed out there. I felt all of it. The collective anxiety, the grief, the simmering anger that just seemed to be baked into daily life. What once felt familiar began to feel unbearable and eventually unsafe. And then one day I had this moment of deep inner clarity that said, I can't stay here. I just don't belong here anymore. And that's when my soul finally said, it's time to go. It wasn't sudden. It was more like a long unraveling. Those whispers that gradually become a roar that you can't pretend you don't hear. Every year, another piece of my peace fell away. The cost of living kept rising. The sense of safety kept shrinking. Conversations got heavier. People were terrified about losing their jobs, their homes, freedoms, and even their sense of reality. And meanwhile, I kept telling myself to stay strong, stay grateful, stay grounded, even as the joy seeped out of my life. Eventually, the thought of the American grind stopped being logical and became intensely spiritual. My soul whispered, this isn't freedom anymore. You have become a slave. I started questioning everything I had accepted as normal, like working multiple side hustles to scrape by, outrageous rent and healthcare costs, political chaos, the constant undercurrent of division, violence, and people becoming meaner and more discontent by the day. It felt like the entire system was designed to keep us exhausted and numb. And that's when I realized this wasn't just about leaving a country. It was about leaving a mindset that I was raised in and choosing something different, to dare to dream, to manifest something different. My rebellious nature woke back up. And once it did, the clock started ticking. And this is what I call the perfect storm. People often ask me, so what was the final straw? What actually made you leave? And honestly, it wasn't one thing. It was everything piled on top of everything else. And then one brutal moment of clarity came. And like most people, I had been adapting to the chaos for years. You hustle harder. You tell yourself you can handle it. You push because you've survived worse. And then when my son moved out and we weren't splitting expenses anymore, I did what I always do. I pushed harder. I took on more substitute teaching jobs, more spark deliveries, more side gigs, while my own spiritual practice and business slipped further and further down the priority list. Just keep grinding, I told myself. You'll make it work. That survival mindset had been stitched into me since childhood. And then it happened. The one thing I couldn't grind my way through.
Thank you for being part of my podcast community. I'm offering podcast listeners an exclusive discount on my intuitive tarot readings, 25% off your first session. Visit charlenemurphy.com/tarot offer, one word. That's charlenemurphy.com/tarot offer to claim your discount. I can't wait to connect with you.
I got an email from my landlord out of nowhere saying she was raising the rent in a month, which was completely illegal. I had a lease. And there it was, yet another person mistaking my kindness for a weakness. I went cold, I went numb, yet another greedy money grab that didn't care who it hurt. I had enough, and something in me snapped. I stared at that email and thought, you know what? F this. Not in anger, but in total clarity. It was like the universe dropped a sign in my lap and said, here's your sign. Can you hear me now? And that rent increase was just the final spark on top of years of dry kindling. In that moment, everything slowed down, and I saw the reality of the United States for what it had become normal in my life. The extreme political divide, gun violence being reported like the weather, homelessness everywhere, corruption out in the open, working harder for less, while my body whispered and then screamed, you can't keep doing this. And then my son's relapse and my denial about it. And all of this merged into one truth. And this was my perfect storm. And perfect storms don't come to destroy. They reveal, they clear, they force your eyes open. They push you toward the life your soul already chose. And that was my light bulb moment. So listening to the call became my only option. Everything shifted the moment I allowed myself to see things as they were and not as I wished they were. Imagining a life outside the United States wasn't about escaping. It was about telling the truth. It was about walking my talk as a spiritual teacher. It was about daring to live differently. And in that truth and through my tears, I found something unexpected: peace. The serenity prayer kept echoing in my mind, a prayer I'd heard 1,000 times but never fully felt until then. Grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Accepting what I couldn't change and choosing what I could became my first real act of freedom. The idea of living slower, freer, closer to nature and community, and doing work that I love reminded me of who I am when I'm not in survival mode. And within 3 weeks, I sold most of my things, I packed my 2 bags, I got on a plane and stepped into the unknown, not because I had the answers, but because my spirit literally could not tolerate the madness any longer. So what's coming next? Well, this is just the beginning. In the next episodes, I'm going deeper into the politics, the fear, the broken systems, the heartbreak, and the spiritual exhaustion that so many of us are carrying. The quiet ways we've been taught to trade our peace for productivity, our intuition for approval, our humanity for survival. And the truth is, that kind of sacrifice has a cost. It shows up as burnout, as numbness, as disconnection from who we really are. Meanwhile, what I've learned, much of the world is still living with much more peace, more humanity, more affordability, and more humility, reminding us that life was never meant to be about winning. That is such an American mindset. It's about running your own race with dignity, freedom, and wholeness. So if you've ever felt that quiet ache inside that says there has to be more to life than this, that's not weakness. That's your spirit asking to be heard. And we can't afford to ignore it anymore. This series isn't here to convince you to leave the United States necessarily. It's here to remind you that your freedom is not a luxury for the lucky few. It's something we reclaim. And when we stop sacrificing our souls just to survive and start choosing lives that actually feel worth living. So make sure you're subscribed. Stay with me on this. And thank you so much for listening. There's a lot more to come. I'll see you in the next episode.
Thank you for joining me today on the Enchanted Empath podcast. I hope you discovered something magical to carry with you as you move through your day. Remember, your intuition is your superpower. Trust it, nurture it, and let it guide you. If you enjoyed this episode, I'd love for you to leave a review or share how my podcast has helped you on your journey. Until next time, stay connected to your inner light and keep shining brightly. You are magic. I'll see you soon.